Alright everyone, we have to start off today talking about the European Union, and it may be a 5-video day despite the immensity of this heat wave, because I've got like 9 different topics backed up, so bear with me a little bit. Maybe I'll keep them a little bit short because, I have to open up the room and vent it with the AC every few videos or something. I don't know exactly. But the European Union right now is in basically a total meltdown, or so it seems. Over the last week, things have gone from bad to worse with regards to them trying to solve their immigration crisis there. It is really the economic migrant crisis. I find it funny because I'm blocked, like my channel on YouTube is blocked in Germany, so, here I am, I'm going to be talking about them. And Germans can see the video, but they can't actually subscribe to my channel. Like, they say, oh, this channel is no longer available, so you can unsubscribe from it. That message is sporadically. It's a censorship attempt. I'm not exactly sure why. But in Germany, the Interior Minister, Seehoffer, has offered to resign. Now, the first report was he was going to resign. Like, he was going to announce the next day, I'm leaving, basically screw this. The minor coalition partner for Merkel's people, if it withdraws its support for Merkel's coalition, the problem, of course, is, hey, it triggers an election because she's no longer capable of actually governing. Now, there's no way to form a coalition, properly speaking, and things would fall through. You'd have a snap election, Germany would be in meltdown. Probably Germany would end up voting for like communists or something. Honestly, at this point, I think things are problematic, but he's offering to resign. I think they're currently in talks. If I read the next wave of reports sort of corrected the first. As far as I know, they're going to hold talks now and try to hammer something out, but the problem is Merkel won't budge on this concept of having a migration deal that basically, it does nothing. It's basically just EU fluff. Sometimes, it's like with Merkel saying, well, maybe we need to do something about, radicalism in the country. Oftentimes with Merkel, as with other people who are like Europhiles, they'll say, we're going to tackle this, we're going to do something, don't worry, we'll hammer out a plan, and then months later nothing has happened. Or the plan that gets hammered out, the rule that gets imposed doesn't do anything because it wasn't really designed to. What it's really designed to do is distract people and kick the can down the road as they move towards full post-nationalism so they can get their European army and then crack some skulls of anyone that dissents. That's essentially what it is. Europe is run, in many countries, especially Western Europe, by tyrants. They are authoritarian tyrants. Merkel's a tyrant. The UK, they're not even part of the EU really officially anymore, and the government there is tyrannical too. So it seems to be more of a Europe thing than a European Union thing at the moment. Then we've got in Hungary, Orban there, who's basically a populist. He's saying, it was reported a while ago that, oh yeah, Hungary had signed on to the sort of the Merkelite, pro-amnesty, I guess, whatever you could term it, migration plan, where it would be voluntary migrant sharing. Basically, Germany took a half step back from imposing its will on the rest of Europe and said, hey, well, we'll just make it voluntary. In other words, basically, France, pony up. You're a bigot if your government doesn't want to, take 1 million people in that you can't actually feed when you've got your own problems. But, we won't force you. We'll just browbeat you into it. We'll coerce you instead of forcing you. That's probably, we'll turn off the spigot of extra money if you don't take them. That's probably Merkel's plan. Orban comes out and says, no, I didn't sign off on this. No, this is just the usual bullshit from the EU, claiming that we're going to be part of this coalition of nations that signs on to the agreement. So apparently, they're now 14 minus 1, because Hungary certainly dissents. Then we've got to look at Italy. Italy is, they've been turning back migrants. The governing forces down there are populistic now, too. It's very funny to look at these nations. It's like years ago. Who would have thought it'd be Italy, primarily in Hungary, that would actually be on the forefront of ripping the European Union apart? Now, some of these movements aren't really Eurosceptic so much as they're inclined to be against taking in economic migrants. That's just a major sticking point with the European Union sort of, scope of operations. The problem is that the European Union inevitably has this problem, will continue to have this problem. It's also an economic problem with currency. having a currency block at all when you have countries that are essentially barely out of third world status, and then you have countries that are hyper-developed and post-industrialized. Sharing a currency can become a little bit of a problem to try to balance the two, so that the richer country can still trade and the impoverished country isn't totally crushed under with debt. It can be a difficult balancing act. It's not working for them, and it never will. The European Union's experiment has fundamentally failed. Merkel will fail, the globalists there that are running things. Eventually, the European Union will probably collapse. Now, it won't fully go away. It'll just shrink in size. Other nations will leave. I don't know why, by the way, Turkey, Erdogan has talked about wanting to join the European Union. You'd be better off creating your own union in your region than creating anything that involves Germany and France. Economically speaking, if you join on to the euro, you'd be screwed too. And Europe is not meant to be a post-nationalist sort of situation. It's meant to be nation states. It's a long-standing tradition within European history, going back thousands and thousands of years. Doesn't work. Rome tried it. Rome failed too, and Rome managed to homogenize things more and didn't have some of the problems that you have in today's world. You know, the need for maintaining nuclear weapons because of those scary Russians next door or something along those lines. Merkel may end up kicked out of power. It's not clear she can govern because, you know, her minor partner might leave. I think, isn't the Bavarian provincial government there is basically rambling about acting unilaterally to solve the problem and saying, no, we're not going to follow the German government on this one. We're tired of it. Hungary is descending. Poland increasingly, you know, showing signs of that sort of latent nationalism as well. Be interesting to see what happens in their next election, maybe. Italy, it's spreading elsewhere. You know, it's like this is sort of what I proclaimed would happen years ago. Coalitions, centrist establishment movements will be the ones that suffer. They're the ones that collapse or get reduced in power or find themselves unable to properly govern. Here you've got a situation, you have a coalition government that can no longer govern. This inevitably causes the collapse of these sort of, you know, vaguely centrist movements. Now, I look at Merkel, I say that she's a leftist. The Germans consider her right-leaning, which is, I think, hilarious based on her reaction to the concept of Europhilia or migration. Over here, we would consider her to be a socialist for most intents and purposes, which perhaps shows why Europe has problems, as opposed to the United States on maybe this and other issues. But looking at the governments over in Europe, who has suffered the most loss? Over the last few rounds of elections, who is steadily losing power? Centrist groups. Establishment forces, groups that have been in power for longer periods of time, like when Labour got wiped out in the UK. Like when Le Pen got, you know, over a third of the vote there in their last election, and you know, basically wiped out smaller competitors, and you know, the Front National became sort of the second largest political movement there. It's happening a lot. Look at what Wilders people managed to accomplish in the Netherlands. They rubbed out the center-right, forcing the establishment's main party to form a coalition, I believe with a bunch of socialists, if I remember correctly, in order to actually govern, because they didn't want to work with Wilders people. They couldn't form a coalition with them. It would be split government. They would be totally dysfunctional. They'd never be able to accomplish anything. I'm not even sure whether Wilders people wanted a coalition, come to think of it. And then you look at Orban running Hungary, and then it's causing people like Soros to have a mental breakdown because he's saying, well, no, we don't like globalism, and we don't want you in our country, you know, basically doing propaganda. You look at Poland, and, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people marching, essentially, you could call it against the EU. Essentially, their march, it's like a march for Poland. That's also a march against the EU. Any latent variant, regardless of its sub-form of nationalism, populism, nativism, I would even say far leftism within Europe. Any form of that inevitably is anti-European Union, because the European Union is run by neoliberals. It's run by people who are kind of like Nancy Pelosi over here. Corporatists. People who like oligarchy. A few rich people who make all the rules and make sure to bilk everybody else. It doesn't really matter if you're poor or upper middle class in Europe. You're getting screwed by the EU. Doesn't matter whether you're from Poland or France or Italy or wherever else you're from. You're getting screwed by the European Union. The situation there has gone from bad to worse. Good. Hopefully the EU collapses soon. That's about all. Peace out.